The Christian Church suppressed for centuries a book that the apostles of Jesus themselves considered sacred scripture. That text did not disappear by accident. It was removed with premeditation because it contained dangerous and uncontrollable truths. What you are about to discover contradicts everything the official history has taught you about angels, giants, and evil. There is a version of the origins of the world that was erased from the biblical canon in a meeting held in the year 363. The Council of Laodicea made that decision without public debate and never explained the true reason for that exclusion. For 15 centuries, the West believed that this text had vanished forever from the history of all humanity. But in the 18th century, a Scottish explorer returned from Ethiopia with 3 intact copies of that forbidden book. What he found in those manuscripts would forever transform the understanding of the origin of evil on the face of the earth. The Book of Enoch is not a forgotten legend. It was directly quoted by the Apostle Jude in the canonical New Testament. This means that the first followers of Jesus knew him and regarded him as valid as the biblical Genesis itself. However, something in its content was so disturbing that the ecclesiastical authorities decided to remove it. To understand the reason, one must read exactly what the Bible condensed into just 4 scarce verses. The canonical Genesis dedicates 4 sentences to one of the most decisive events in all of human history. It simply says that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and decided to take them as wives. It lacks names, details, and does not explain the consequences that forbidden union had for the future of the whole earth. The Book of Enoch dedicates dozens of complete chapters to narrating everything that Genesis chose to omit voluntarily. And what it reveals is not a story of forbidden love, but the most complete description of the origin of the evil that exists today. Mount Hermon at the northern border of Israel was in ancient times the point of contact between heaven and earth. His name in Hebrew literally means the consecrated, and it was not chosen by chance for what was about to happen. It was there that 200 celestial beings descended together and made a decision that would alter human destiny. It all began at the top of that mountain, under a cloudless sky, in the silence that precedes great changes. The Book of Enoch calls them the Watchers. In Hebrew, the Irin, fiery beings who guarded creation from the beginning. But that night on Mount Hermon, the Watchers did something that no celestial being had dared to do before. They formalized a solemn pact among all of them, an oath that bound them together before the forces of the universe. They swore to descend together to Earth, unite with human women, and share with men the forbidden secrets of heaven. The Book of Enoch names each of those 200 beings in a record that the Bible deliberately chose to omit. Their leader was named Semyaza, and alongside him descended Azazel, Armaros, Baraqiel, Kokabiel, and Tamiel, among many others. Each name on that list corresponds to a domain of knowledge that the angels were completely forbidden to reveal. Azazel taught men the art of forging swords, shields, and armor with metals extracted directly from the earth. Azazel also revealed the foundations of metallurgy to create weapons of war earlier than history acknowledges. Semyaza transmitted the forbidden enchantments and the art of manipulating the invisible forces of the external natural world. Armaros taught the art of dissolving those very enchantments, a knowledge that only belonged to the beings of the divine plane. Baraqiel revealed the mysteries of astrology and the hidden relationship between the stars and the fate of men. Kokabiel transmitted the knowledge of the celestial signs and the meaning of the omens written in the night sky. Another of the angels taught men the secrets of the magic of plants and the hidden poisons in the roots. Sariel revealed to men the movement of the moon and the secrets of the calendar that the gods reserved for themselves. Another of the watchers taught the use of cosmetics and adornments, corrupting the natural innocence of human women. Another one revealed the secret of root cutting with properties that men were never meant to know. The Book of Enoch is explicit that every gift transmitted to human beings was actually a deliberate form of corruption. The Watchers did not come down to help humans. They came to contaminate the original plan from within. And the consequences of that pact on Mount Hermon soon manifested with unprecedented violence. From the union between the Watchers and the women, creatures were born that were neither completely human nor entirely celestial. The Book of Enoch calls them the Nephilim, and its description goes far beyond the 4 vague lines of the canonical Genesis. They were giants of monstrous stature that consumed the earth's resources with a completely insatiable voracity. The text says that they first exhausted the animals, then the crops, and finally began to devour the men. The Nephilim were not just physical giants. They were beings of a dual nature and deeply unstable from their origin. They carried within them the celestial blood of the Watchers and the mortal blood of human women in an explosive mix. That mixture made them powerful beyond all measure, but condemned them to a completely uncontrollable violence. The land was transformed, the fields devastated, the forests razed, and the cities turned into mere ruins. The deepest catastrophe was not material but spiritual, as the Nephilim also corrupted sacred knowledge. They used the stolen secrets of heaven to dominate men with terror and establish themselves as the first tyrants. The text describes cities where crying never ceased and fear had settled as the only possible state of the soul. Men could no longer feed themselves, raise their children, or sleep without the terror of the Nephilim always lurking. The Book of Enoch describes how the cry of oppressed humanity ascended to the very throne of the Creator of the universe. 4 archangels presented themselves before God and described with complete accuracy what was happening all over the earth. Raphael received the order to chain Azazel in a pit of perpetual darkness beneath the desert of Dudael until the judgment. Gabriel was commissioned to confront the Nephilim, not to eliminate them, but to make them destroy each other. Miguel received the mandate to bind Semyaza and the remaining Watchers under the hills of the earth until the Great Judgment. The Book of Enoch describes with an unsettling precision the exact place where those beings were sealed and confined. Then something more significant than the angels' condemnation occurred: the death of the Nephilim themselves. When the giants destroyed each other in the war that Gabriel unleashed, their physical bodies fell to the earth. But their spirits, that impossible mix of the celestial and the mortal, lacked an assigned place in the cosmic order. The Book of Enoch states that those wandering spirits became the first demons that roamed the earth. They are not fallen angels in the conventional sense. They are the specters of a race that should never have existed. This revelation transforms the understanding of the origin of evil and the nature of the dark forces present in the world. The demons of the scriptures are not abstractions. They are, according to Enoch, the orphaned souls of the children of the Watchers. It is at this point that the Book of Enoch becomes most disturbing for the official theology of the churches in the West. If demons are spirits of dead Nephilim, then evil has a physical, historical, and completely traceable origin. And that implies that the entire human story is permeated by an invisible conflict that the canon preferred not to name. This is the reason why the New Testament speaks of demons with such precision, not as a symbol, but as a reality. If demons have history, have origin, and have name, then they also have a specific traceable weakness. If demons have history, origin, and name, then evil can be understood, traced, and confronted. And this understanding is precisely what the most powerful institutions in history have sought to prevent at all costs. However, the Book of Enoch does not end with the condemnation of the angels or with the death of the Nephilim in that war. The most extraordinary thing is what comes immediately after the unique role of Enoch as a witness in that cosmic story. Enoch was not only Noah's great-grandfather. According to the text that bears his name, he was the only human who knew the Watchers. He was the intermediary that God chose to communicate the divine sentence to the angels who awaited their condemnation in terror. The book describes how Enoch was transported in vision to the place where the Watchers awaited their sentence in terror. They begged him to intercede for them before the Creator and to present a plea for mercy before the divine throne. Enoch wrote that supplication and brought it in prayer before God, thus becoming the first sacred scribe in history. But the answer was irrevocable. There would be no mercy for the Watchers, whose condemnation was sealed forever. The text reproduces the words that Enoch was to convey to the angels who awaited the verdict in absolute anguish. God communicated through Enoch that the Watchers had been sent to guard men, not to mingle with them. By crossing that sacred border, they had broken the fundamental order upon which the entire architecture of creation rests. This section is significant because it reveals that the transgression of the Watchers was completely conscious and deliberate. It was not an unintentional mistake. It was a calculated rebellion against a limit that all the Watchers knew perfectly well. What makes the narrative more disturbing is the connection between this story and the flood described in the canonical Genesis. If we already explored in a previous video what happened during the flood, today we find the deep and real cause of that event. The flood was neither a climatic catastrophe nor a vague response to widespread human wickedness, as suggested by Genesis. According to the Book of Enoch, it was a cosmic cleansing operation specifically designed to eliminate the race of the Nephilim. It was the only possible way to purge the earth of the genetic and spiritual contamination that the Watchers introduced. Noah was preserved because, in the words of the text itself, he was perfect in his generations, that is, pure in his lineage. This phrase that Genesis includes without explanation takes on a completely different meaning in light of the Book of Enoch. It described Noah's lineage as biologically pure, free from the contamination of Nephilim blood, not his moral righteousness. This biological distinction turns the flood into something more than a punishment. It was an intervention for genetic cleansing. God did not destroy sinners. He eliminated an unauthorized modification in the genetic code of his own original creation. The flood had a genetic and spiritual purpose that the canonical Bible reduced to a parable of repentance and forgiveness. But the Book of Enoch goes further and reveals something that practically no religious tradition in the West mentions. Before the flood, an angel was sent to warn Noah about what was coming and to instruct him on his exact mission. The text describes that communication with details that Genesis does not preserve exact materials, dimensions, and purpose. And it suggests that the knowledge to build the ark did not come from Noah, but from a completely celestial and external source. This answers a question that scholars have posed for centuries without finding an answer in the preserved biblical text. How could a man without technical training design a vessel capable of surviving a planet-wide flood? The Book of Enoch indicates that he did not do it alone, but received instructions from an intelligence that far surpassed the human. This connection between the forbidden knowledge of the Watchers and the wisdom given to Noah to build the ark is key. It establishes that even in the divine response to chaos, there is a transmission of higher knowledge with a sacred purpose. The difference is that the knowledge of the Watchers was given to corrupt, while that of Noah was given to preserve. This contrast is at the heart of the theology of the Book of Enoch and explains why its content was so dangerous. It is necessary to stop here and pose the question that for 2,000 years no one dared to ask in public. The Book of Enoch thus establishes a theological architecture that goes far beyond the simple distinction between good and evil. There are not two abstract forces in conflict. There are two types of knowledge with radically opposing purposes. Ethiopia preserved the text and an understanding of the cosmos that the West buried with the forbidden book. In Axum, even today, the priests hand copy the Book of Enoch, convinced that they are safeguarding a fundamental truth. If the Book of Enoch was respected by Jesus and his apostles, why was it removed from the Christian canon of the West? The official response is that the text was not authentic and was composed too late to be attributed to the real biblical Enoch. But this explanation has a problem that historians constantly point out when studying the formation of the canon. Many texts accepted in the canon present authorship and dating issues that are as serious or more serious than those of Enoch itself. The decision of the Council of Laodicea in the year 363 was not theological at its deepest root. It was political and strategic. A text that described the origin of evil as angelic rebellion was an extremely difficult instrument to control. If demons are souls of Nephilim, salvation does not depend solely on faith and obedience to any institution. It depends on understanding a cosmic reality more complex than any religious hierarchy can calmly manage. The removal of the Book of Enoch was a way to simplify theology and concentrate interpretive power in a few hands. But the text survived, guarded for 17 centuries by the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church without interruption. The Ethiopian Church considers the Book of Enoch to be part of its official sacred canon to this day, without any reservations. This profound theological difference is ignored by the West when it speaks of the Bible as if it were a single text. There is not a single universal Bible. There are multiple canonical traditions, and the Western version is just one among all of them. The Dead Sea Scrolls, found in Qumran between 1947 and 1956, confirmed that the Book of Enoch was in circulation before Christ. 11 partial copies of the text were found in those caves, indicating that it was one of the most read in that community. The selection of the canon was a political process that lasted centuries, excluding texts that many considered sacred. The criteria for including or excluding a text were never completely transparent to the believing communities. That community, known as the Essenes, preserved sacred texts outside the Temple of Jerusalem and away from official power. His library contained writings that the authorities of Jerusalem had marginalized or rejected as non-canonical. The Book of Enoch was so represented in Qumran that it was clearly considered sacred by large sectors of Judaism. And this raises a question that theologians still debate. Did the early Christians know a different version of the faith? Historical evidence suggests that yes, and that version was more complex and disturbing than the one that survived in the canon. Because the Book of Enoch does not only speak of fallen angels, it describes a cosmic conflict that is far from over. The Watchers are chained, but the text states that their spirits, the demons, continue to operate in the present world. According to Enoch, their mission mirrors their parents, to tempt, corrupt, and destroy all of creation. This continuity between the sin of the Watchers and the present demonic activity makes the text perpetually relevant. It is not just distant history. It is, according to its own narrative, the description of forces that remain active in today's world. What is remarkable is that Jesus of Nazareth, according to the Gospels, spoke of demons with a completely natural familiarity. He expelled them, interrogated them, and recognized their nature with an authority that left his witnesses absolutely perplexed. If the Book of Enoch was part of Jesus' universe, that familiarity gains a coherence that the canon never explains. I wasn't discussing abstract concepts of evil. I was addressing entities whose origins I knew with total personal certainty. This perspective transforms the Gospels in a way that official theology has never wanted to explore with any seriousness. It introduces a cosmic dimension and an awareness of angelic history into the message of Jesus that the official canon reduces. However, the story does not end with the floodwaters receding over the devastated face of the earth. The Book of Enoch reveals something that Genesis does not mention. Not all the Nephilim perished under the waters of the flood. Some of their descendant lineages survived and continued to exist among the peoples that came afterward. This coincides with what Genesis itself mentions by saying that there were Nephilim on the earth even after the great flood. Moses' spies returned from Canaan, describing men of such size that beside them they looked like mere locusts. King Og of Bashan, whose bed was 9 cubits long, appears in Deuteronomy as the last representative of that race. Goliath of Gath and his brothers are the final vestiges in the biblical text of a genetic line that the flood did not erase. The Book of Enoch suggests that Israel's mission was not only territorial, but also an active mission of genetic purging. The wars of Canaan take on another dimension when it is understood that they were directed against those specific bloodline lineages. They were not common ethnic conflicts. They were the direct continuation of the cleansing operation that the flood had initiated. This reading is uncomfortable for modern theology, but the text of the Old Testament supports it with total clarity. And the Book of Enoch provides the framework to understand those wars within a completely coherent cosmic narrative. All of this transforms the way that Genesis must be read, as that text can no longer be read in isolation as it was before. The Genesis we know is not the original. It is an edited and condensed version of an older and denser tradition. Behind 4 verses about the children of God lies a story of 200 angels with names and consequences. Behind the vaguely mentioned Nephilim are giants who transformed the land into a territory of terror and darkness. And behind the flood, there is a cosmic operation designed to purge creation of a deliberately introduced contamination. The Book of Enoch does not contradict Genesis. It completes it and restores the depth that the canonical edition deliberately removed. Reading it is like recovering the pages that someone tore out of a book before handing it to you, as if it were the complete version. What makes this book extraordinary is that it doesn't ask you to abandon what you believe. It only asks that you understand it better. Every biblical reference that previously seemed vague or inexplicable takes on a precise outline and coherent logic with Enoch. The 4 verses from Genesis about the sons of God no longer seem like a marginal note, but rather the echo of something much greater. That deeper understanding is exactly what the most powerful institutions in history have sought to prevent. And the inevitable question when finishing that reading is why someone deemed it necessary to tear out exactly those pages. The story suggests that those pages contained information that made it very difficult to control what people believed about the world. A people that understands the origin of evil and angelic history is much more difficult to govern through dogma. It is more difficult to convince him that he needs intermediaries to access a truth that he can find in the texts themselves. The Book of Enoch was removed not because it was false, but because it was too powerful to be left in the hands of the people. For 17 centuries, that strategy worked in the West, while Ethiopia silently and continuously safeguarded the text. Until James Bruce returned from Axum in 1773 with his 3 copies, and the Western world rediscovered what it had lost. Bruce described the astonishment he felt when he understood what he had in his hands in that scriptorium in Ethiopia. I knew I was looking at something that Europe had declared non-existent for more than 1,500 years of ecclesiastical history. His return to Scotland with those copies was ignored for decades by scholars who did not want to see their implications. Today, that text is available for anyone who wants to read it, and it remains as disturbing as it was in its own origins. It speaks of a world where the invisible and the visible intertwine in ways that modern science cannot yet classify, of beings that crossed forbidden borders and whose consequences resonate in human history to this day. From a conflict born on Mount Hermon millennia ago, and whose waves, according to the text itself, have not finished propagating. The Book of Enoch does not alter the Bible, it returns the torn pages so that it finally has complete and true meaning. If this story has changed the way you read ancient scriptures, subscribe so you don't miss the mysteries that follow.